The cool, dry air of my Santa Fe apartment always offered a profound sense of peace. It carried the faint, earthy scent of ancient pinyon wood and the sharp, invigorating aroma of roasted green chile, a comforting blend that spoke of quiet solitude and grounded existence. My mornings for the past 2 decades had unfailingly begun at 5 a.m. Not out of necessity for a demanding schedule, but from a cherished habit, a deep appreciation for the still, pre-dawn quiet, the gentle, almost imperceptible stirrings of the high desert waking to a new day. At 63, I, Elise, had long since extricated myself from the relentless, often brutal, churn of Silicon Valley, the arena where I had, against all odds, forged an improbable fortune. My journey there had been anything but conventional. I started not in glittering boardrooms, but in a dusty garage in Palo Alto in the late 80s, fueled by ramen noodles and an insatiable curiosity about how data could be not just processed, but understood. I was a quiet anomaly in a world dominated by brash young men, a woman with a keen intellect and an uncanny ability to spot patterns where others saw only noise. I built companies from scratch, specializing in nascent artificial intelligence algorithms and advanced data analytics platforms. Each venture was a relentless sprint, consuming my waking hours, often my dreams. I'd sell them off, quietly, strategically, always staying just below the radar, reinvesting my profits into new, even more ambitious and often clandestine projects. My final, most lucrative exit, the sale of my most valuable patent portfolio in predictive analytics to a tech behemoth, had funneled a staggering $850 million into a meticulously structured, impenetrable trust managed by a discreet Swiss banking firm. This immense wealth, a testament to decades of relentless effort, astute foresight, and countless sacrifices, was known only to my late husband, Richard, my steadfast partner in life and innovation, who had passed away 5 years prior, and my small, elite team of lawyers and financial advisors. My children, Scarlett and Mark, knew nothing of it. Not a single digit, not a single asset. They believed I lived a comfortable, perhaps even quaint, retirement, supported by a modest pension and a handful of prudent, yet limited investments. This carefully guarded secret was more than just a financial shield. It was my sanctuary, my quiet act of rebellion against a world that often valued women only for their roles as mothers or wives, never for the empires they might secretly build. It allowed me to observe, to reflect, to live simply and anonymously, away from the grasping hands and expectations that come with immense wealth. And as the story of my life would soon prove, this very secret would become my most potent weapon. The truth about my relationship with my children wasn't a single cataclysmic explosion of betrayal. It was far more insidious, a slow, agonizing bleed, 1,000 small cuts inflicted over 2 decades. It was the phone calls that perpetually went unreturned, the holidays that were always spent elsewhere, the perfunctory text messages filled with vague promises of future visits that never materialized. My daughter, Scarlett, a woman of formidable intellect but boundless ambition, had always been drawn to the superficial glitter of success, the external validation of titles and designer labels. My son, Mark, a promising architect with a quiet talent, often seemed to simply follow his sister's lead, either out of convenience or perhaps a desperate unspoken need for her approval. They adored their stepmother, Bethany, my ex-husband Robert's second wife, a woman who exuded an almost theatrical warmth, a perfected blend of charming smiles and understated elegance. Bethany had glided into their lives when Scarlett was 12 and Mark 10, effortlessly filling the emotional void I had, in my single-minded pursuit of financial security, unintentionally created. The irony, of course, was that every empire I built, every dollar I hoarded, every sleepless night I endured, was, at its very core, meant to secure their futures, to provide them with opportunities I'd never had. I often revisited the morning of Scarlett's doctoral graduation from Stanford, a mere 2 years prior. It was a day etched into my memory with painful precision. I'd spent a full 20 minutes in front of my closet, debating the appropriate attire for a discarded mother attending such a significant event. I settled, finally, on a muted gray suit, the very same one I'd worn to my own mother's funeral years ago. It felt fitting, another kind of death, a somber acknowledgement of a profound loss. Scarlett had called me precisely once about the graduation, not, mind you, to invite me, but merely to inform me of its occurrence. The entire conversation, I remembered, had lasted exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds. I had watched the microwave clock, its digital numbers a stark, mocking counterpoint to the brevity of my own child's tolerance for my voice. "It's at 2 o'clock, she'd said, her voice carrying that familiar, crisp edge of efficiency, a barely concealed impatience whenever she was forced to acknowledge my existence. "You can figure out parking, right?" There was no, "I hope you can make it." No, "I saved you a seat." No, "I'm excited for you to be there." Just a detached assumption that I, the eternal problem solver, the quiet backbone of their world, would simply figure it out, just as I always had. I arrived at the sprawling Stanford campus an hour early. A small, carefully chosen gift nestled in my purse. A vintage silver locket that had belonged to my grandmother, the woman who had truly raised me after my own parents, consumed by their own dreams, had left me largely to her care. My grandmother, bless her traditional heart, had instilled in me the unwavering belief that family was everything, that you sacrificed every ounce of your being for your children, that mothers, especially, were meant to gracefully recede into the background so their offspring could bask in the unblemished light of their own achievements. How profoundly foolish I had been to internalize that philosophy, to let it guide my life's quiet narrative. The massive auditorium was already a beehive of activity, half full with eager families. I walked through the cavernous hall, my gaze sweeping across the rows, searching, almost desperately, for a familiar face, a reserved seat, any subtle sign, any small gesture that hinted at my expected presence. There was none. My son, Mark, dressed in a sharp suit, was already at the very front, ushering Bethany, my ex-husband Robert, and their 2 impossibly golden-haired, impossibly cheerful children towards the most coveted seats in the house. Their laughter, light and carefree, echoed through the vast space, entirely oblivious, or perhaps deliberately so, to my arrival, my solitary figure standing at the periphery. They looked, to the casual observer, like the quintessential perfect family, a picture postcard image of familial bliss, utterly complete, utterly vibrant, and utterly, agonizingly, without me. A polite but firm usher, a young man with a headset clamped over his ear, stopped me as I tried to inch forward. "Tickets, ma'am?" I fumbled in my purse for the generic guest pass Scarlett had. With typical efficiency, texted me. It was a general admission ticket, a cold, printed confirmation of my marginalized status, a subtle but unmistakable slight. "My daughter, Scarlett Montgomery, is graduating," I explained, my voice carefully modulated to conceal the tremor of hurt. He glanced at the ticket, then at the bustling front rows, then back at me, a flicker of something that looked suspiciously like pity in his eyes. "Those seats are reserved for immediate family and VIPs, ma'am. Your ticket is for Section Z, row 34. Section Z, the very last section, behind a massive structural pillar, directly beneath a humming, industrial-sized air conditioning unit." The irony, a bitter, metallic taste in my mouth, was not lost on me. I, Elise, the quiet architect of their comfortable lives, the silent, unacknowledged force behind the very privilege that had allowed Scarlett the luxury of pursuing a doctorate at Stanford, was relegated to the nosebleeds, quite literally obscured from view. Meanwhile, Bethany, a woman who, to my knowledge, had contributed nothing tangible but charming smiles and a few carefully curated holiday photos to Scarlett's journey, was front and center, positioned perfectly to bask in the reflected glory of my daughter's triumph. A cold, precise, and utterly unyielding fury began to simmer deep within me. It was a sensation I hadn't felt since my early days in the male-dominated tech world. A primal urge to prove myself, to fight for my place. This wasn't just neglect. It was a deliberate, public, and calculated act of erasure. As Scarlett's name was called, and I strained to catch a glimpse of her distant figure accepting her diploma on stage, all I could truly see from my obscured vantage point was Bethany in the front row, beaming, whispering proudly to Robert, occasionally waving with almost regal assurance to Scarlett on stage, as if she were the one who had nurtured this brilliant mind, as if she were the proud, deserving mother. The sight, a tableau of carefully constructed deceit, ignited a spark within me, a smoldering fire that had been dormant for far too long. My grandmother's well-intentioned but ultimately destructive words about sacrificing everything, about mothers fading into the background, suddenly felt less like timeless wisdom and more like a generational curse, an ideology that had enabled this very betrayal, this profound injustice. That day, as I drove back to my quiet Santa Fe apartment, the vast, indifferent expanse of the New Mexico desert stretching out around me, a profound and irreversible shift occurred within my soul. I had sacrificed my youth, my personal relationships, nearly my entire identity, to build an empire, to create a legacy, only to be cast aside by the very beneficiaries of my relentless labor. The cruel irony was suffocating. But then, a new thought, sharp and clear, cut through the fog of pain. My secret wealth wasn't merely a financial shield. It was an undeniable testament to my strength, my resilience, my independent power. It represented every solitary decision, every sleepless night, every strategic gamble, and with a chilling resolve, I knew it was finally time to wield it. Over the next 2 years, the small cuts continued, a steady drip of dismissiveness and emotional distance. But my reaction to them had fundamentally altered. I no longer chased after their elusive affections, no longer initiated calls that I knew would go unreturned. I, gracefully, almost imperceptibly, declined invitations that felt like afterthoughts. Invitations where I knew I would be merely a peripheral prop in their carefully constructed perfect family tableau. Instead, I began to watch, to plan, to leverage my vast, hidden resources in ways Scarlett and Mark, blinded by their own self-importance and a colossal underestimation of their mother, would never in their wildest dreams anticipate. My former life in tech, decades spent dissecting complex systems, identifying vulnerabilities, and mastering the art of leverage, had honed my instincts to a razor's edge. And my children, despite their formidable intellects, were operating within a system they believed they thoroughly understood, utterly unaware that I, the discarded mother, held the master key, the override codes to their seemingly unassailable lives. My focus narrowed with ruthless precision. Scarlett, with her newly minted doctorate in corporate law, was rapidly ascending the ranks at a prestigious New York City firm, Madison and Grant. She was, undeniably, brilliant, but her ambition was a cold, relentless force, bordering on ruthless. She specialized in high-stakes mergers and acquisitions, complex financial maneuvers where every nuanced detail, every piece of financial leverage, mattered with existential urgency. Mark, meanwhile, was making a significant name for himself in the world of sustainable architecture, his boutique firm, Viridian Designs, gaining considerable traction for its innovative, eco-friendly projects and its rising profile among environmentally conscious developers. They were, in their own ways, building their nascent empires, much like I had, but on a foundation of unacknowledged privilege and a deep-seated, almost congenital, contempt for the very person who had made their climb possible. I called my oldest and most trusted friend, Eleanor Vance, a formidable woman who, like me, had painstakingly carved her own path in a world largely designed for men. Eleanor, a renowned financial consultant and forensic investigator, was one of the very few people who knew about my hidden fortune since its inception, having discreetly advised Richard on its labyrinthine setup. She was one of the rare individuals who saw beyond Elise, the quiet Santa Fe widow, to Elise, the strategic mastermind, the silent force of nature. "They're circling, Eleanor said, her voice sharp and to the point during one of our weekly encrypted video calls. Scarlett's firm, Madison and Grant, just landed the deal of a lifetime. They're handling the merger of Argent Holdings and Horizon Tech. It's the biggest deal in the city this year, potentially setting new precedents for M&A. And Mark's firm, Viridian, just scored the architectural contract for the entire Argent Holdings campus redesign, a multi-million-dollar project that will put them on the national map. They're at the absolute apex of their game, Elise. And they genuinely believe they got there all on their own, I mused, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on my lips. Exactly, Eleanor confirmed, her voice laced with grim understanding. They've forgotten the foundation, Elise. They've forgotten who cleared the path, who quietly ensured the ground beneath their feet was firm. Then it's time for a rather emphatic reminder, I said, my voice hardening, taking on a steely edge that reminded me of my earliest days in cutthroat boardrooms. Eleanor, I need you to discreetly and meticulously begin acquiring a significant, but not immediately alarming, stake in both Argent Holdings and Horizon Tech. Not enough to trigger public alerts, but enough to give me a definitive voice, an undeniable controlling hand. And I need a full, discreet financial and professional background check on every single key player within Scarlett's firm, Madison and Grant, and every individual associated with Mark's Viridian Designs. Every detail, every potential vulnerability, every hidden skeleton in every closet. I want to know their strengths, their weaknesses, their ambitions, and their fears. Nothing, Eleanor, is too small to investigate. Eleanor, a woman of impeccable discretion and ruthless efficiency, didn't ask a single question. She simply said, her voice a quiet affirmation, "Consider it done, Elise. It's time they learned the true cost of ingratitude." Over the next few months, I orchestrated my moves with the breathtaking precision of a chess grandmaster. From the quiet sanctuary of my Santa Fe home, I transformed into a silent, omnipresent force in the dizzying, high-stakes world of New York finance. I became a shadow investor, a ghost in the machine, pulling strings from thousands of miles away. I wasn't merely buying shares. I was systematically acquiring leverage, strategically accumulating power. My deep network, cultivated over decades of discreet dealings and whispered favors, provided me with direct access to the highest echelons of corporate intelligence, the kind of information that only immense wealth and decades of strategic networking could buy. I knew everything. The intricate internal politics of Madison and Grant, the simmering rivalries within Viridian Designs, the subtle power plays among their partners, the hidden weaknesses in their financial structures, the whispered anxieties that kept their top executives awake at night. I knew about the illicit affairs, the offshore accounts, the petty jealousies, the ambitious backstabbing. I had an almost omniscient view of their carefully constructed professional lives, and I waited for the opportune moment to dismantle them. Scarlett's call came, a rare occurrence that genuinely caught me off guard, her voice brimming with unadulterated excitement. "Mom, you won't believe this. I'm being honored at the Women of Wall Street Gala next month. It's absolutely massive. I'm receiving the Rising Star in Corporate Law Award. It's basically the fastest, most direct track to becoming a full partner at Madison and Grant." "That's wonderful, dear," I said, my voice warm and outwardly sincere, betraying absolutely none of the cold, intricate calculations churning beneath the surface. "I'm so incredibly proud of you. Will you be sending an invitation for the event?" A beat of hesitation, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift in her tone. "Oh, well, it's a very exclusive event, Mom. Limited seating, you know. High-profile clients, senior partners, that sort of thing. But I'll see if I can get you a ticket. Maybe something in the mezzanine." The mezzanine. Not even Section Z this time. A slight step up, perhaps, but still a clear, polite dismissal. A relegated position, far from the spotlight. And I knew with chilling certainty that Bethany, draped in the latest designer silk, her smile radiating practice perfection, would be seated at the coveted front table, basking in the reflected glow of Scarlett's meticulously cultivated achievement. "Don't trouble yourself, dear," I said, my voice still as sweet as honey, imbued with an underlying steel that only I could detect. "I'm sure I can figure something out." The Women of Wall Street Gala was held in the opulent, cavernous grand ballroom of the Omni Tower, a gleaming steel and glass monument to corporate power, rising majestically in the heart of Manhattan. The guest list was a literal who's who of finance, law, and media, a carefully curated collection of the city's elite. Security was exceptionally tight, an invisible velvet rope separating the powerful from the merely aspirational. I arrived precisely at 6:58 p.m., 2 minutes before the doors officially opened, preferring punctuality and precision over dramatic flair. I stepped out of a nondescript black SUV, eschewing the ostentation of a limousine. My attire was a masterpiece of understated power, a bespoke charcoal gray suit, tailored to perfection, undeniably luxurious yet subtly commanding. My hair, silver and elegant, was pulled back in a neat, severe chignon. On my wrist, a simple vintage watch, not flashy, but an antique Patek Philippe that whispered volumes of old money, impeccable taste, and undeniable class. A young, impeccably dressed woman with a discreet headset met me at a private, unmarked entrance, entirely bypassing the main red carpet throng. She held a tablet in her hand, her eyes scanning its illuminated screen. "Mrs. Montgomery, welcome. Miss Price is expecting you. Please, call me Elise," I said, my voice calm, yet radiating an undeniable authority that compelled immediate obedience. "And the reservations are under Elise Thorne." Her eyes widened almost imperceptibly, a fleeting flicker of recognition in her otherwise professional gaze. "Of course, Miss Thorne. This way to the VIP green room." The green room. Not the grand ballroom, not the mezzanine. The private sanctum reserved for the evening's most distinguished guests, the true power players. Inside the VIP green room, a space paneled in rich mahogany and adorned with abstract art, sat the true titans of the industry. Harrison Vance, the formidable CEO of Madison and Grant, Arthur Sterling, the chairman of Argent Holdings, and Liam Blackwood, the head of Horizon Tech, the very orchestrators of the multi-billion-dollar merger that Scarlett was so proudly leading. They looked up, a collective expression of surprise on their faces as I entered, my presence unexpected, a sudden, quiet disruption in their exclusive space. "Good evening, gentlemen," I said, a faint, almost enigmatic smile playing on my lips. My voice was calm, utterly devoid of any overt emotion. "I trust you're having a productive evening." Harrison Vance, the stern-faced CEO of Madison and Grant, a man whose presence usually commanded instant deference, rose cautiously, a flicker of apprehension in his eyes. "Miss Thorne? We weren't expecting you. Is there a matter concerning the merger that requires your immediate attention?" "Oh, nothing urgent," I said, settling gracefully into a plush leather armchair, crossing one leg elegantly over the other. The casualness of my posture belied the steel in my voice. "Just a small matter of ownership, you understand. As the principal shareholder of both Argent Holdings and Horizon Tech, I simply thought it prudent to be here tonight. This merger, you see, is particularly close to my heart, more so than you might imagine." Silence. Stunned. Absolute silence descended upon the room, thick and heavy. Their faces, usually so composed, so impervious to surprise, crumbled into masks of undisguised disbelief. They knew the name Thorneth, elusive, enigmatic investor who had been quietly, almost invisibly, accumulating massive, controlling stakes in their companies. A silent, powerful partner they'd never been able to identify, whose true identity had remained shrouded in mystery. They just hadn't connected the dots between the powerful, hidden financial force known as Thorne Industries and the seemingly unassuming woman who now sat casually amongst them. They certainly hadn't connected Elise Thorne to Elise Montgomery, the discarded mother of their firm's rising star. But Scarlett Montgomery. Harrison Vance stammered, his words stumbling, his eyes darting frantically between me and the closed door. "She's leading the M&A team. Your direct involvement is quite unexpected, to say the least." "Scarlett is indeed a talented attorney," I conceded, my tone dry, almost clinical. "But her talents, like all talents, flourish best when nurtured in a fertile environment. An environment, I might add, that I, as the primary beneficiary and silent benefactor of her future, have meticulously cultivated for decades. A landscape, if you will, that I own. Just then, the double doors swung open, and Scarlett herself walked in, radiant in a shimmering emerald green designer gown, her face flushed with pride and triumph, her Rising Star Award clutched tightly in her hand, its polished surface reflecting the opulent chandeliers above. Behind her, beaming broadly, her smile, a perfected mask of maternal pride, was Bethany. They stopped dead, their celebratory smiles freezing, then slowly melting into expressions of bewildered shock as they saw me, sitting comfortably amongst the industry giants, an uninvited, impossible presence. Scarlett's eyes narrowed, a flicker of confusion, then annoyance, crossing her face. "Mom? What are you doing here? How did you even get in? I thought you were in the mezzanine." Her voice was a sharp, barely concealed whisper, laced with barely controlled irritation, as if I were a particularly tenacious stray cat that had somehow managed to sneak into an exclusive black tie affair. The implication was clear. I didn't belong. "Scarlett, darling," I said, my voice sweet as honey, yet cutting through the air with the precision of a scalpel. "I told you not to trouble yourself. I always figure things out. And as for how I got in, well, when you own the building, access is rarely an issue. Wouldn't you agree?" The words hung in the opulent air, a devastating silence. Scarlett's jaw dropped, her perfectly made-up face draining of all color. Bethany's face, usually so meticulously composed, went ashen, every ounce of her practiced charm evaporating in an instant. The industry titans in the room shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their eyes wide with revelation, suddenly understanding the quiet earthquake that had just rumbled through the room, its epicenter seated calmly before them. "Own the... what?" Scarlett stammered, her voice barely a whisper, a strangled sound of disbelief. Her eyes darted frantically to the powerful men around me, desperate for a denial, a contradiction, anything that could make sense of the incomprehensible. "The Omni Tower," I clarified, with a delicate, almost dismissive wave of my hand, as if discussing the most mundane of matters, the weather or the price of coffee. "It's one of my smaller, more sentimental investments. I've been gradually acquiring properties in the city for decades. And as for the merger you've been working so tirelessly on, darling, let's just say I have a rather vested interest in its success. A particularly significant one, in fact. As the largest controlling shareholder in both Argent Holdings and Horizon Tech, I've decided to take a more active, hands-on role in the proceedings. Effective immediately." Scarlett's face drained of all remaining color, her eyes wide with a horrific, soul-crushing realization. The truth, raw and brutal, crashed down on her, her entire glittering career, her meteoric rise, her meticulously cultivated image of independent genius. All of it was built on a foundation laid by the mother she had so casually discarded, so utterly disrespected. Her Rising Star Award, clutched in her trembling hand, suddenly seemed like a hollow mockery, a meaningless trinket. "This is impossible!" Bethany shrieked, her voice a raw, unhinged sound, no longer able to maintain her charming facade. Her carefully constructed world was crumbling. "You live in that dusty little house in Santa Fe. You said you had a pension. You're a fraud, a liar." Her voice rose to a hysterical crescendo. "On the contrary, Bethany," I said, my voice icily calm, cutting through her hysteria, my gaze unwavering, pinning her in place. "I am the real thing. Always have been. My modest life was a choice, a carefully constructed test. A test, I regret to say, that some of you, particularly you and Scarlett, failed spectacularly and demonstrably." I turned my attention back to Harrison Vance, the CEO of Madison and Grant, his face a canvas of profound shock. "Harrison, I believe we need to discuss a slight reshuffle in the M&A team, and perhaps a comprehensive reevaluation of certain ethical considerations and internal biases within your firm's leadership and corporate culture." My lawyers, led by Eleanor Vance, will be in touch first thing tomorrow morning. Prepare for a full audit. Scarlett, unable to bear the weight of her humiliation and the public dismantling of her carefully crafted identity, crumpled, the Rising Star Award slipping from her nerveless grasp and clattering to the polished marble floor with a pathetic, echoing sound. All her carefully constructed composure vanished, replaced by a raw, exposed despair that was painful to witness, even for me. Bethany, seeing that the game was truly and irrevocably up, turned and fled, her designer heels clicking frantically down the hallway, desperate to escape the devastating truth. The room, moments ago filled with a gentle hum of polite conversation, erupted in a cacophony of whispers as the news, an electric current, filtered through the elite gathering. The powerful men, whose multi-billion-dollar deals and corporate futures now depended entirely on my decisions, suddenly surrounded me, their previous expressions of mild disdain or polite indifference replaced by a palpable, almost desperate deference. The discarded mother had just, in a matter of minutes, become the most powerful, most sought-after woman in the room. The next few weeks were a dizzying whirlwind of activity, a meticulously orchestrated symphony of legal maneuvers and strategic financial adjustments. My lawyers, led by Eleanor Vance, executed my instructions with ruthless efficiency. The Madison and Grant merger proceeded, but under my direct and unyielding oversight, with Scarlett's role significantly curtailed, her path to partnership at the firm suddenly fraught with new, insurmountable obstacles. Her once stellar reputation as a rising star was now irrevocably tarnished, overshadowed by whispers of nepotism, questionable ethics, and a profound lack of self-awareness. She learned, the hard way, that true power isn't merely about professional prowess or academic achievement, but about integrity, respect, and the often unseen forces that can either elevate or utterly destroy a career. She was forced to confront the harsh, undeniable reality of her own choices, stripped of the comforting illusion that her success was purely her own making. Mark, my son, surprisingly, was different. He was quieter, more contrite than I could have ever anticipated. He actually flew out to Santa Fe to see me, unannounced, unprompted by Scarlett. He sat on my porch, bathed in the soft glow of the desert sunset, surrounded by the familiar scents of pinyon and chile, looking smaller, humbler, more genuinely remorseful than I had ever seen him. "Mom," he said, his voice barely a whisper, filled with genuine sorrow. I'm so incredibly sorry. I didn't realize. I just always went along with Scarlett. I wanted her approval. I wanted to fit in. I never meant to hurt you. I didn't see." I listened, my heart aching with a familiar maternal pain, a deep-seated longing for the child he once was, but also with a new, quiet strength. "Mark," I said gently, my voice soft yet firm. "Intentions matter, but so do actions. And your silence, your indifference, your willingness to stand by and watch your sister sideline me, that was as painful as any act of betrayal. It was a choice, Mark. But you're here now. You came. And that, in itself, means something." We talked for hours, openly, honestly, for the first time in years. I recounted my grandmother's misguided wisdom, my own youthful regrets, the suffocating burden of carrying such an immense secret for so long. I didn't offer forgiveness easily, nor did I demand it. I simply laid out the truth, plain and unvarnished, the raw reality of my past, my sacrifices, and the profound hurt they had inflicted. The consequences for Scarlett were undeniable and far-reaching. Her once guaranteed path to partnership at Madison and Grant was indefinitely stalled, her reputation as the rising star now irrevocably tarnished by the public revelation of her mother's true power and her own egregious misjudgment. She struggled, for the first time, to navigate a world that no longer automatically bent to her will, a world where her superficial charm and raw ambition were no longer enough. She learned, through bitter experience, that trust, once broken, is almost impossible to fully repair, and that true influence is built on respect, not just a flashy resume. Mark, on the other hand, embarked on a slow, arduous journey of rebuilding, not just his career, but his character. His firm's lucrative contract was eventually reinstated, but under stricter clauses, with greater oversight, and with an undeniable shadow cast by his past associations. He started visiting me regularly, not out of obligation, but out of a genuine desire for connection, for understanding. He began to question Scarlett's influence, to forge his own independent moral compass. Our relationship, though still fragile, began to heal, piece by agonizing piece, built on a new foundation of honesty and earned respect. Bethany, my ex-husband, Robert's second wife, vanished from their lives, her superficial charm and carefully constructed facade unable to withstand the harsh, unforgiving light of truth. Without Robert's continued financial backing, which had been largely tied to my previously hidden investments, her luxurious lifestyle crumbled, and she quietly faded into obscurity, a cautionary tale of opportunism. I, Elise, continued to live in Santa Fe, amidst the quiet beauty of the desert, the scent of piñon a constant reminder of my chosen sanctuary. But my life was no longer small, no longer defined by quiet anonymity. I used my immense fortune to establish the Elise Thorne Foundation, a powerful nonprofit organization dedicated to empowering women in tech and business, providing crucial mentorship, essential seed funding, and, perhaps most importantly, robust legal protection for older women who had been financially exploited or emotionally discarded by their own families. I spoke at conferences, not as a victim, but as a survivor, a strategist, a woman who had, through sheer will and hidden power, reclaimed her narrative. My story, once a silent, burdensome secret, became a beacon of hope and strength for countless others, a testament to resilience and the enduring power of self-worth. The greatest lesson I learned was not, as many might assume, about the sheer, undeniable power of money, though it had proven to be an indispensable force in my ultimate vindication. It was, rather, about authenticity, about the crucial importance of firm boundaries, and the profound courage it takes to be seen for who you truly are, your flaws, your strengths, your undeniable accomplishments, and all. It was about recognizing that while we cannot choose our biological family, we absolutely can choose how we engage with them and what uncompromising standards we require for healthy, respectful relationships. True wealth, I had discovered, wasn't merely measured in dollars or properties or the ostentatious landing of private jets. It was found in relationships built on mutual respect and genuine care, in the unwavering integrity with which you lived your life, and the profound, positive impact you chose to create for others. By those measures, I had indeed become wealthy beyond measure, not when my companies hit multi-billion-dollar valuations, but when I finally stood in my full truth, illuminated by my own light, and demanded that others meet me there, or not at all. My story isn't a whimsical fairy tale with a perfectly happy, saccharine ending. It's messy, complicated, with enduring loose threads and unresolved hurt, but it's real. And for the first time in my life, after decades of hiding and sacrifice, that feels like more than enough. It's not about vengeance, not truly, but about a fierce, unwavering commitment to justice. It's about drawing an indelible line in the sand and saying, with an unshakable conviction, no more. It's about rediscovering your own intrinsic worth when others have tried, so brutally, to diminish and erase it. It's about building something so profoundly strong, so unshakably resilient, that it protects everyone else from suffering the same devastating fate. If you are watching this, or reading this, because you are currently navigating a similar painful situation, I want you to know, with absolute certainty, that you have choices. You can choose to continue accepting the paltry crumbs of affection and respect, allowing yourself to be slowly drained. You can choose to walk away entirely, to sever the toxic ties that bind. Or, and this is perhaps the most courageous choice, you can choose to demand better, to rise to your full stature while simultaneously remaining open to the rare, beautiful possibility that people, even the most seemingly intractable, can genuinely change. The ultimate choice, my dear friend, is unequivocally yours. But whatever path you choose it for yourself, for your peace, for your soul, not because it's what other people want or expect from you. Choose it because it is precisely what you need to be whole, to be fully, authentically you. Remember, always, that your worth is not determined by your bank account balance, nor by what you can tirelessly provide to others. Your worth is inherent, an unassailable truth of your very being. And you, just like me, deserve unequivocally to be heard, to be seen, and to be profoundly respected.